everybody, and welcome back to Heezy Game Media. I'm Heezy, and today we're talking about one of my favorite games of all time. I'm actually being serious here. I think this might be one of the most underrated games I've ever played. And it's funny because the Game Boy Advance holds a special place in my heart. Not that the Super Nintendo, the regular NES, the Nintendo 64 don't hold special places in my heart as Nintendo consoles, but as a child who grew up in the 90s, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, they did something special for kids, which is they allowed that experience of playing that Super Nintendo, and they brought it with you on a car ride to Disneyland. They brought it with you everywhere that you went, and I got to play some amazing games through that experience, and I'm excited to talk to you today about Zoids Legacy. So, for those who don't know, Zoids is an anime series that covers a couple of different animes. My favorites are Zoids Chaotic Century and Zoids New Century. This follows two different heroes. It follows BitCloud and Van. Van in Chaotic Century and BitCloud in New Century. These are like two of my favorite animes of all time, and this game follows a new hero that's really sweet and really cool. You follow the story of Zero and Juno. These are new people to the Zoids multiverse or the Zoids universe, so you haven't heard of them before. But it's actually a really fun addition to the Zoids universe, and you get to learn about maybe some Zoid universes that you haven't heard of before. I, for one, didn't watch Zoid blocks and things like that, so these new additions to the Zoid universe were really awesome for me to witness. But outside of that, I think that you follow this time travel, this multi-universe conundrum in a really cool way. But I'd like to talk about the game overall and my review for it, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to review the game as a whole. The story is pretty good. I think that it's pretty easy to keep up with if you watched any amount of the Zoids universe, and even if you didn't, you probably can keep up with a lot of it. And there's some depth to this game that I don't know that you get out of all the RPGs that you might play on the Game Boy Advance. And it's one of my favorites. So if you have an emulator or you have a Game Boy Advance lying around, this is definitely one that I would pick up for both the story aspect and if you're a strategic turn-by-turn player like me. These are the type of games that I really love. So one of my problems with the story overall is throughout the game, you start to lose characters that you care about. So example is Bit. You get Bit early, you lose Bit, you get character X or character Y, and then you lose them. And this is kind of frustrating from a gameplay perspective because you spend so much time upgrading your Zoids, caring about your Zoids, caring about your characters, and when you lose those characters, it's kind of annoying. And that's probably my biggest beef with this game. Well, my second biggest beef with this game. Other than that, I think that there's a few things. First of all, I think the leveling is super simple. It's auto-leveling for the most part, so you don't have to worry about your stats. You basically just have to worry about the stats of your team and the type of Zoids that they use and the type of Zoids that they're maximized for. The combat system is a turn-based combat system that attacks certain segments. So each team has 6 segments where 6 Zoids can fit, depending on the size of the Zoid. And then you attack certain segments with different weapons on a turn-by-turn basis, and then there's a ranking system similar to like something like Dungeons & Dragons where you roll an initiative, stuff like that, and then turns are sequenced according to that. If you ever play something like Final Fantasy Tactics, it's very similar to that onto the turn sequencing. So the other thing is Zoid acquisition in this. So you start out with Zoids, you acquire Zoids through the game, and then you can build Zoids for different costs. So in this game, there's a gold system or a money system that lets you upgrade and build your Zoids. Overall, I think that this is okay. There is one issue that I have with it that we'll get into later, but for the most part, you get to build the Zoids that you love. You get to check out new Zoids. It's really cool if somebody who loves the game Zoid or the TV show Zoids to be able to attack with a Liger Zero, to be able to attack with a Blade Liger, and then even try out some new Zoids that I haven't heard of before that you get to fall in love with. And then you even get to customize those Zoids. What color did you want your Blade Liger? What color did you want this? What weapons did you always think would look really cool on a gun sniper? Things like that are really cool in this game, and you get to do that in ways that you couldn't before. Now, there are other Zoid games that I honestly haven't played too much of. I know there was a GameCube game that was pretty popular, but this one really spoke to me because I got to walk around with it, right? The Game Boy Advance experience was really cool to me. Now, there is a pretty quick escalation of the team. This is not a problem, but you start to get so many characters that you don't really have time to build them all. you don't really have time to go in depth with them all. Now, depending on the amount of grinding that you want to do in a turn-based RPG like this, maybe you do. Maybe you have all the time you need, and it's just like, hey, I'm going to go grinding these characters for the next hour, and that's really fun for you. For me, I'm about the story, I'm about kind of the turn-based actions, and I'm about kind of getting through the game in my dad phase right now. So, for me, the characters that I didn't care about, right? Those characters that I didn't know about this in the Zoid universe, they didn't matter as much to me. However, if you're new to the Zoids universe, this might be really fun for you because there's so many characters to explore. Overall, I think my biggest issue with this game, number one, is first forcing you to use Zoids that are hard to get. So, for example, there's a part in the game that requires you to use a very large Zoid. And you don't just have a very large Zoid to begin with, you have to go get it. So part of Zoid acquisition is there's two parts of Zoid acquisition. You need the part to make the Zoid, and then you need the data to make the Zoid. So because it's a two-part acquisition, unlike in Pokemon, right? In Pokemon, in your RPG, you just throw a Pokeball, you catch for the Pokemon, you have the Pokemon now. That is not the case in this game. You have to have both the part to make the Zoid and the data behind the Zoid itself. And if you don't have both those things, you can't create that Zoid and move forward. So this was a big hiccup for me the last time I played this game. It took me hours to get the size Zoid that I needed to compete in the contest that I was supposed to be competing in. And that's really tough. There shouldn't be that big of a barrier of entry to move forward in a video game. And it's something that I think that if I were to change one thing about that game, that would be it. It would be how you acquire Zoids and how you use them, or how you incorporate them into your team. Because I would have been happy to just go create that Zoid at the right amount of money, maybe even have to pay a little bit of extra if I don't have the data or don't have the part. But having to go grind to get this Zoid on my team was definitely not fun, and it was a barrier to entry for me to move on in the game and in the story. Whereas, if you really want me to do that, just give me a Zoid to do that part of the quest and then take it away later. I don't really care, but it was definitely a part that I didn't like. Overall, I think this is one of the more fun RPGs that I played, though. I think that I really love turn-based combat. This does a great job of executing it, as well as letting you set up your team to do different things. You could have really long-range guys in the back. You could have guys that are really good at short range in the front. Kind of do different parts of strategy that you might not get out of a Fire Emblem or a Final Fantasy. And it's really cool to play with and really fun to experiment with. It's something that I personally have really enjoyed. So, overall, I give this game an A-. I think this one's really fun. Definitely something that you should check out. And I give it an A- for a couple reasons. The biggest downfall, I could not give this game an A. I think that making me spend hours grinding one single piece of this game was too much. And that being said, it's not actually that fun because you have to find an extra large Zoid, and then you have to find the data for it. It's just really rough. Whereas I think if they had just given you one, it's so seamless and so fun that you don't even mind losing the Zoid if you have to lose it later. I think that this game does a really good job of a few things. One, it's one of my favorite turn-based combat systems. Two, it's definitely one of my favorite stories. I think that you really start to care about... You see the characters caring about each other and growing. Characters that aren't supposed to be friends make friends in this game, things like that. You see another piece to parts of the anime that you hadn't seen before. So overall, the story is really high. And overall, I think it just makes up a great video game and definitely one that you should check out for the Game Boy Advance. So if you're looking for something fun to play, this is definitely one that I would check out. This is Heezy Game Media, and we'll see you guys all next week for another video.